All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to today's show. It is Newsflash, and it's a Friday for us. It's a Friday for you. Every day is a Friday. That is great. It's a Friday for you, a Friday for me, and let's celebrate. No show for us tomorrow because we are going to be departing to Puerto Rico. We'll have some stuff for you about how things are going down there. We will be there. It's going to be great. We're trying to pump a little bit of money back in the tourism economy. That's what we'll try to do for the good people of Puerto Rico, and also want to try and film, do a few broadcasts from there about just how things are generally going. All right, so yeah, JP Morgan Chase will not benefit from a recent bipartisan deregulation bill passed in the Senate. The bank's CEO, Jamie Dimon, claimed in The Intercept last week after an event in Washington. The banking bill is only really affecting smaller banks, so it really doesn't have anything to do with us, Dimon said in an event organized by Axios at Howard University titled Smarter, Faster Revolution. I think if they get a little bit of relief, it's good for them and their ability to finance America. So, yeah, this is what we can play. We can play a little bit. We can play a quick sound here on what he said at this little get together. Here he is talking about this little this bank bill that he had. Hopefully, this will play for you guys. And if not, that would be very unfortunate.
I wanted to ask you about the banking bill being considered in Congress right now. What you think of the bill, the capital requirements in the bill, what it means for your company?
The banking bill is only really affecting smaller banks, so it doesn't really have anything to do with us. And I think if they get a little bit of relief, it's probably good for them and their ability to finance America.
Yeah, so that is pretty much the direct quote I just meant. So that's pretty cool. Yeah, so Dimon's assertions calls into question why JP Morgan has spent resources to lobby for the bill and could shape the way the federal rule makers interpret the statute and translate into regulation. So it's a fair point that the Intercept here is making. Why are you spending so much money on lobbying for this bill, and putting all your resources in there, all your lobbying resources in there, if it doesn't really affect you? JP Morgan has been active on this bill, which the Senate had cleared on March 14th on the strength of 50 Republicans and 16 Democrats, and one Democratic-leaning independent. A look at the lobbying disclosure forms show that JP Morgan spent $810,000 on lobbying for financial issues in the fourth quarter of 2017, including S2155, the Economic Growth and Regulatory Relief and Consumer Protection Act. That is the bill that was passed. So the bank was one of 119 separate organizations that have lobbied on the bill. But as we know, in particular, JP Morgan discussed proposals related to bank structure, capital requirements, capital formation, and market structure and market liquidity, as well as issues related to the treatment of custody and capital and liquidity requirements. That latter activity is important because it refers to what's become known as the Citigroup carve-out. A chief lobbyist registered to the JP Morgan lobby on the bill is Jason Rosenberg, a former banking aide to Senator John Tester of Montana, a Democrat, and the lead author of the bill. So they got that special personal connection. The provision contained in Section 402 of S2155 exempts money placed in the central bank reserves from the calculation of supplementary leverage ratio, one capital requirement for banks that would enable banks to earn larger returns with borrowed money, but would also increase the risk of failure because the bank would have less money to absorb losses. The reform was intended to apply to only so-called custodial clients, which primarily manage assets for clients rather than making loans. However, Senate leaders changed the provision's wording so it could potentially affect two large banks, Citigroup and JP Morgan Chase. So they want to give them a big break for those two big banks. Both engage in custodial activities, but that's not their main business line. Their language change took place sometime in the fourth quarter of 2017. At the same time, J.P. Morgan engaged in lobbying the bill most intensely, so their lobbying efforts worked. They changed the bill, but the reform was intended to only apply for so-called custodial banks, which manage assets. However, the Senate leaders changed the wording so it affects them a little bit more. So, after revisions, the CBO estimated there was a 50% chance that J.P. Morgan, CBO, by the way, Congressional Budget Office, they estimated that it was a 50% chance that J.P. Morgan and Citigroup would be able to take advantage of the custodial bank provision. The number is likely an underestimate, considering that Donald Trump's industry-friendly regulators would be the ones making the determination. I know I talk suddenly in a Spanish accent. I just don't know why I did that. Yeah, so 50% chance J.P. Morgan and Citigroup will likely. So pretty much it's a 75 to 90% chance. That's where I put it. Personally, because, industry failure, friendly regulators, and probably definitely intense lobbying by Citigroup and J.P. Morgan, because they're not going to be like, okay, you say no, and by the way, it's a very small chance these Trump industry regulators say no. You start lobbying, start pushing, and all of a sudden you'll get what you want there. So, pretty much is a very likely chance that they're going to take advantage of this bill, and the J.P. Morgan CEO did not know really what he was talking about there. So I'm sorry. With this primary election last week, Congressman Dan Lipinski, a Blue Dog and cultural conservative, won the first 2018 battle between the Democratic Party's establishment and progressive wings. Don't be confused about what it means. The war is already over, and the establishment has lost, according to this opinion article by Charlie Methstesian. What I want to do is kind of break this down. I want to add my take to it. I want to kind of just work my way through it, if you know. But even though only 2 states have actually voted so far this primary, Texas, a red state redoubt, and Illinois, a blue state stronghold, the battle for supremacy this primary season is all but complete. In state after state, the left is proving to be an animating force in Democratic primaries, producing a surge of candidates who are forcibly driving the party toward a more liberal orientation on nearly every issue. This is very good to hear. These candidates are running on an agenda that moves the party beyond its recent comfort zone towards a single-payer health care, stricter gun control, a $15 minimum wage, and more expansive LGBT rights and greater protections for immigrants. And the surest sign of, or just fighting for any protections on immigrants whatsoever, fighting the little bit. We have people who are literally throwing themselves on Trump if they don't, they're literally personally attacking Trump on the right if they don't give him the wall that he wants. So on the left, we'll say, oh, well, I guess we'll do it some other time. I'm sorry, we're going to have to rain check the fate of 800,000 dreamers. Yeah, that'll be a great idea. Like, how wimpy, how quiet, how weak, how sad can you be there? And the surest sign of a reoriented issue landscape, they're joined by some of the most prominent prospects in the 2020 presidential field, Cory Booker, Kirsten Gillibrand, and Kamala Harris among them, who are embracing this same agenda. According to the data compiled by Brookings Institute's primary project, the number of self-identified non-incumbent progressive candidates in Texas spiked with the previous 2 election years. This year, there are nearly 4 times as many quote-unquote progressive candidates in 2016. A lot of people remember Hillary Clinton called herself progressive, so that doesn't mean too much. Even in Illinois, where the Democratic Party holds most of the levers of power, the data tells a similar story. There are more progressive candidates this year, the primary project reports, than moderates and establishment candidates by a count of 25 to 21. In Lipinski's case, the congressman didn't believe the strength of the opposition until it was nearly too late. He scrambled in time to defeat Marie Newman, his Bernie Sanders-backed challenger, but the slim margin of victory raised considerable doubts about the future, including whether he can hang on in 2020 when the progressives will return in force to try to finish him off in a presidential year. When the Democratic turnout after 4 years of Trump is likely to be incredibly high. 2 more years, if after 2 years the people are this energized, imagine how they will be after 4. Like, that would be an incredible thing. So Bernie Sanders may be possibly going to run, and it would be very nice. It would be very nice to see him run. I don't want to like talk about anything because so much still has to happen. But I think he's going to run it. I want him to run it. Like, he's just so good on everything. Like, all of his tweets about policy, and literally, yeah. It's just getting dreamy. All right, whatever. Yeah, I just kind of got a little bit distracted. Got a few notifications on my phone. It happened. I do apologize. But anyway, the veteran congressman, Dan Lipinski, who was abandoned in his hour of need by some of his more liberal colleagues in the House and left for dead by the House Democrat campaign arm, wrote an article in Real Clear Politics this week that he was struck by one progressive member's greeting once he returned to Washington. Congratulations might be unexpected coming from me, but if they'd taken you out, they'd be coming after everybody. The party's ascendant left is coming after everybody, regardless of the outcome in Lipinski's race. Progressive energy is pulsing through the primaries, most notably in the proliferation of Trump backlash grassroots like Indivisible, Justice Democrats, brand new Congressmen are teaming up with activists inspired by Bernie Sanders' 2016 presidential campaign. There is no comparable counterweight within the establishment. So there is some really strong, ever-growing groups in here. Justice Democrats, brand new Congress, Indivisible. All these guys are pushing hard for really strong progressive reforms. That is cool. That is good. And, we'd love to see that. Long-time Democratic incumbents, most of whom's voting record so far has been more liberal than that of Lipinski, an abortion rights opponent who voted against the Affordable Care Act in 2018 and is anti-gay, have been caught in the crosshairs of these activist groups in some of the blue states on the map, among them California, Massachusetts, and New York.